Guys, watch out for this Jeffrey Epstein case. I really believe that this is going to be a blockbuster of a case, not only with regard to other indictments that may roll against other high-profile, very wealthy, powerful, and famous people, but I'm telling you, myself and my boy Gene Rossi here, as former prosecutors that have entered into, and I was in charge of whether or not a person got a non-prosecution agreement or not, there is something that is rotten in Denmark about this non-prosecution agreement. But thankfully, we've got our friends up here in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York that have made an indictment. Because if, in fact, these allegations are true, and of course everybody is presumed innocent, they are about as bad as you get. They are the reasons why the enticement statute, the pornography statute, the production of child pornography statute, the interstate transportation of minors, and everything that we do to protect sex trafficking of minors is in existence. So if you look up those laws and the reason for it, and if in fact he's guilty, and of course he's presumed innocent, his picture should be right next to it, as would a guy like Larry Nassar. Now, we have to attribute all this to the excellent reporting at the Miami Herald, who investigated and broke this case, and there is no question in my mind that based upon the media reports about this and the pressure ratcheting it up, that the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York may have become aware of all this and decided to investigate it, or felt that they were required to investigate it. This is just fascinating. Gene, I want to juxtapose it with a case that I recently got done defending.
Right.
I've talked to you about this offline.
You have.
About an individual who was age of consent at some points in time during, did something that wasn't accurate, pled guilty to it, brought her across state lines into New York, then took a picture, and that's an use of an interstate facility, was being threatened with the enticement statute. And again, this was a singular victim in the case, and I'm not justifying the conduct, and he accepted responsibility for it. But he wound up getting a 7-year federal sentence. They went at him full guns, and he got a 3-year state sentence. Both jurisdictions prosecuted him. And what I'm looking at in this, I'm trying to read as we're going through this, in this non-prosecution agreement, is in fact, he was being looked at for the enticement statute with multiple victims. He's looking at the pornography statute, interstate transportation of multiple females. He had about as worse as you could get in the criminal laws federally. And so when you tell me, and I agree with Dershowitz, he did a phenomenal job, but don't tell me, based on my experience, this was done because they believed it was an appropriate resolution, when you have other jurisdictions where we've got people going to jail for uber years for singular photographs of child pornography, or making a mistake with one victim. And again, they should be punished for that. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but this guy gets this kind of sweetheart deal in a non-prosecution agreement. It just rots.
Well, I got to tell you, Secretary Alex Acosta's testimony before Congress offends me as much as anything. One of the rationales for this sweetheart deal is that the federal interest was served. Okay, one of the things he mentioned was the victims can now sue, Jeffrey Epstein. Whoop-de-doo. What we need is him to go to jail for 30, 40 years. I want to add something that people aren't talking about. I worked for Maine Justice, the Leviathan. And there's a section called Child Exploitation and Obscenity section. I want to know, were they involved, number one? And number two, did the Attorney General of the United States in 07 and 08 bless that non-prosecution agreement? And I can't imagine that Acosta approved that agreement without somebody from Maine Justice agreeing with him.
I got 2 more questions I'll add to that, Gene Rossi. We should be the investigators. They should hire us to look into this case. Here's 2 more, Gene. How did this get past the judge, which in the non-prosecution agreement had to sign off on it? To give, again, an illustration of the case that I just got done handling, we had initially agreed to an 11C plea, which locks it in, no relevant conduct to be accepted, to 60 months, 5 years. The judge took a look at it and said, I am not comfortable with all the relevant conduct and this whole idea, just another sidebar, that he gets up and testifies that they made an argument that these girls were prostitutes is offensive. Offensive because if they're young girls, they're being exploited as prostitutes. So to use that as a justification for lowering it, I don't know. But in my case, the judge sat there and said, I don't think, when I'm looking at a 22-year recommendation by probation with relevant conduct, maybe you can talk to to our audience what relevant conduct means. I don't feel comfortable with the 5, and ultimately we agreed to the 7. That's how serious they take this case. And by the way, that was without an enticement charge even being charged at that point in time. If we had rejected that plea and they went into the grand jury, he'd be looking at the rest of his life in jail, as this guy with multiple victims would be spending multiple life sentences. Thoughts?
Well, I have to look at the record more, but the state court folks were the ones who got the plea from Jeffrey Epstein. All the U.S. attorney did was say, you guys carry the ball. We're going to stand down. We think the federal interest is served by you getting a conviction. I don't think plea documents were presented in federal court regarding this case. But I do got to say this on the relevant conduct. If I'm a drug dealer and I sell a kilo of cocaine and I plead guilty to that kilo, relevant conduct means this. I obviously sold many more kilos than just one, so all the other kilos that I sold become part of the sentencing, even though I pleaded guilty to that 1 kilo. That's relevant conduct.
Right, Gene, just to wrap it up, to make sure we put a fine point on it, paragraph 3, in terms of the agreement says, and you are correct, this agreement is contingent upon a judge of the 15th Judicial Circuit accepting and executing the sentence agreed upon between the state attorney's office and Epstein, the details of which are set forth in this agreement. Either way, a judge signed off on this agreement. And if it were me and I were king of the world, I'd be looking at everyone involved in this because something is rotten in Denmark. Gene Rossi, this Epstein case is going to keep on going. I can't wait to continue about it. It's one that gets my fire up. But we got to do some business here at the Law and Crime Network. Take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Law and Crime.